Welcome back. Hottest show in the galaxy. It's the Karen Hunter Show. We're here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126. It seems to be presidential season. About 22 people have already thrown their hat in the ring. More than 600 have signed up for the right to run for president of the United States of America. Something is going on. And this woman came out, put a shot across the bow that people are now having to answer to. Let me welcome to the show. She's an author. She's a spiritual guide. She is a teacher. And maybe the next president of the United States? I don't know. Marianne Williamson, welcome to the Karen Hunter Show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, first of all, thank you for showing up. I went on Twitter and hollered at you, and you responded. And I said, hey, she, first of all, handles her own Twitter page, which most people don't, right? So I learned something about you in that moment. Number two, you didn't let anything, not a day pass. And I was like, okay, impressive, proactive. Okay, those are traits we need in a president. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
You started off your run. You said we need a moral and spiritual awakening in the country. Nothing short of that is adequate to fundamentally change the patterns of our political dysfunction. I've had a 35-year career in naming and transforming those dynamics. That's my qualification for presidency. What propelled you to actually step out in this way? Because you didn't have to.
Well, I think that I share with millions of people, yourself included, deep concern about the state of our country. And I don't know any conscious person who's not asking on some level, how might I help? And I believe in responding to that call from what goes on inside us. I'm sure that every person who's running for president feels that call on some level. And that was mine.
Do you really feel that? Because I look at the people who run for president are highly narcissistic. I find that people who run for office in general, at that level, you know, local politics is where all of the stuff actually happens, where people roll up their sleeves, whether we're talking about school boards or state legislators. You ran for the House in California in 2014. You didn't win. And I would ask, you know, the presidency, you've started you've started a food movement in California. Like, you help in so many other ways. Why this?
I feel that the conversation that dominates our national politics is so narrow. It is so disconnected from the heart. It is so disconnected from wisdom as to be perilous at this point. It is perilous to our democracy, and it is possibly perilous to life on earth within the next 100 years. This is not the time to think about anything other than what needs to be done. It's not a time to do all kinds of rational, logical, analytical calculation about what might happen when or who should do what. This is a moment of national emergency, as I see it. National emergency in the sense that our democracy itself is in peril. And the chronic disengagement of so many of the best and the brightest of Americans from the political situation, political activism, is what got us into this mess. It's not the solution. So I think a lot of people who have not been part of politics, traditional politics, because it is so toxic that we threw up our hands and thought, well, the change isn't going to happen from there. We're going to go do whatever we can do in the private sector, nonprofit sector, leave that to those guys. But what those guys are doing, they have driven us into such a ditch. And by they, I don't mean particular individuals. I just mean a mindset that has driven us into this ditch. And we're supposed to, at this point in history, look to that mindset and decide which one of them can lead us out of this ditch when that mindset is what got us into it. No, you know, the spirit of my dead father would say, you know, this must not be this. No, this is. I think it's illogical. And you know, you were talking about moral leadership. Franklin Roosevelt said the primary responsibility of the presidency is moral leadership.
So when you look today, was there a moment, Marianne Williamson, where you said, I am getting off my couch or I'm getting out of my comfort zone? Because you know, you're a wealthy woman. You know.
I'm not wealthy by today's standards by any means, but I'm comfortable enough that I certainly don't need to do something that's going to lose your money.
Right, right. So was there a moment, a point, was there an issue or situation where you said, I am going to...
There was a moment when I was here in New York. I was sitting on my bed in the middle of the day and looking out the window. Yes, there was a moment, and that moment was followed by a month of, it was quite something, I must say, of what felt like a prolonged moment of clarity. But then I sort of crashed emotionally onto the rocks of material reality. What are you talking about? Inevitable humiliation, inevitable embarrassment, inevitable mockery, inevitable bad pictures, inevitable smears, inevitable lies talked about you. What are you talking about? And that that moving into that place was depressing, and it was followed by a year and a half of full-on processing. Can I stand that? Can I grow a tough enough skin to be able to endure that? And talking to people that I respect. And, it's kind of like Johnny Appleseed leaving the seeds in front of you. Everywhere I walked, there was the offering from people, from situations seemed to be.
Come on in.
Kind of like when you say to a little child who's just learning how to walk, come on,
baby. Who's the first person that you heard from that said, this is a good idea?
Everybody that I know actually said it was a good idea on some level, but none of my close friends or associates underestimated the seriousness or the emotional risk. The first person I talked to in terms of politics was Tom Hartman.
We love Tom Hartman.
Yeah, I love Tom
Hartman's
Hartman
on the
too.
Progress Channel here at Sirius XM. He's a brilliant guy, and he loves his country, and
he's an old friend of mine, and I really trust him.
That's a good one. No, he is to be trusted. He's also a Taurus. Just wanted to put that out there for anyone who's listening. We're talking about Marianne Williamson. It's my brother. Next call that came in that said, this is what you should do and why.
I don't think it was anybody calling in to say what you should do this. It was my asking people what they thought of it.
Who else did you ask after Tom?
Close friends, associates, my daughter, of course. My daughter is 28. Her first response was, what do you need this for, Mommy? I knew that. Actually, I take that back. That was not her first response. Her first response when I told her was, you go, girl. And I was like, what happened to my daughter? Where did you put her? Because that wasn't at all what I would have expected. And she said, when you lost your congressional race, you were at your house crying one day, and you were so depressed about the whole experience. And I asked you, Mommy, what can I do for you? And you might not remember it, Mom, but you said to me, you looked at me and you said, if I ever tell you that I'm running for president, please do not use this moment to discourage me. And she said, and then she said, and I am a woman of my word.
Because that's how you raised her. So you were thinking then, after you lost your congressional race and you ran as an independent, not as a Democrat,
correct,
even though you were a registered Democrat. And that's a seat held right now by Lou, I think.
Ted Lieu. Good guy.
Yeah. So why run?
Well, when I finished my congressional campaign, I thought that was over. Multiple people asked me, are you ever going to do that again? I said no. I thought it was an itch that I'd scratched. Been there, done that.
What did you learn during that run?
Well, I learned that it's not enough to just know the issues and know that you could hit the ground running as a congresswoman. You have to know something about a political campaign, which is a whole different thing. That I had known nothing. But, Ray Dalio wrote a book called Principles, and he put something in that book. He said, if you're going to live a meaningful life, you're going to take risks. And if you're going to take risks, you're going to fail sometimes. But if you fail well. And that meant a lot to me. I like to think I failed well. I think the only real failure is something you fail to learn from.
Or fail to try.
Perhaps fail to try. And all I know is that my gut, my heart says that I'm supposed to be here right now talking to you about what we're talking about.
Is there a voice that you hear?
No more, no less than anyone else. I think that we all have intuition. I do feel as both Christians and Jews have this concept of the small, still voice for God. I think when we quiet our minds through prayer, through reflection, through meditation, through mindfulness, we get a greater clarity of wisdom. We're all so assaulted these days by the craziness of the moment in which we're living. And it takes spiritual practice of some kind to quiet the mind. And then it's all in your own head. It's all the voice of your own, your own higher power speaking. And, when you said earlier that you think anybody running for president that you've met is coming from a narcissistic place, Abraham Lincoln ran for president. I haven't found in my experience of life that politicians are any different than anybody else.
That was a different time.
Yeah.
We didn't know Abraham Lincoln personally. He could have been a wild narcissist. History is written by people who win. So you're going to write about people in a way that
we have a lot of his
glorify them.
words, though.
Yeah, we do, and I think he evolved as a person, as we all are on this journey to do. But I think there has to be some desire to be in front of people. I think in your case, having read your writings, that your motivation is different. And I actually am going to challenge you. I don't think you necessarily want to be president as much as put issues to the forefront of what we need to be talking about as a nation. And I think you've done that from the moment you announced, and your first thing was talking about reparations. And that made me and a whole lot of people sit up. Now that question is being asked of a lot of people, and we've never been asking that question in this country. So what was that about, Marianne Williamson?
Before we go there, can we go back to the you don't really want to be president part?
Okay, go ahead.
I agree that I'm not like giddy. I saw one candidate being interviewed on TV the other day, and when it was said you might be president one day, just her whole face lit up with such giddiness, which would make me, that to me is suspect. Anybody who's like excited at the prospect, but the fact that one is willing to be president, I think, is very serious. And I'm not doing this just to elevate the conversation. I'm doing this to try to elevate America. It's too late in the game for us just to be having a higher conversation. And I'll tell you something else, and I know you'll understand exactly what I'm saying, because this topic of reparations is a perfect example. The status quo protects and perpetuates itself by co-opting disruptive language. So the last thing I want to be is somebody just giving the status quo language that they can use to dress up their incremental approach. That's not why I'm here.
I just read from a resolution that was put forth this day, which I called high BS.
The one today about
about the rebuke of, and I said you can't legislate behavior.
That's right.
Right. None of these words are going to get into the hearts and minds of Americans to treat one another better. It is all lip service and window dressing to say that you did something. It's a checklist. But it's not getting at why we are so dysfunctional as human beings.
And that's why I'm running. And I also think that exactly what you pointed to is exactly why I'm running. And that's not a peripheral issue. That is everything.
That's core, central to...
That's fundamental. It's something that is missing in the connection between the consciousness of the average citizen of the United States and the political process. Donald Trump, as I see it, is a kind of opportunistic infection. Our immune system is weakened. We're not connecting. If you say all men are created equal, all men given by God inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, governments instituted among men to secure those rights. If that's just on a marble wall somewhere or on parchment behind glass, but not ablaze in the hearts of people, it loses its moral force.
We're here though. This is where we are in this country right now.
And that's why we need a president who reconnects those dots.
How do you reconnect those dots, Marianne Williamson? You know, some would argue, separation of church and state is built into our fabric as well. And you're coming with a highly spiritual message into a political experience.
Separation of church and state is one of the most enlightened aspects of our Constitution, but that has nothing to do with what I'm doing here. Separation of church and state protects the government from interference by religious clergy. No minister, priest, rabbi, mufti, imam is going to come down the hall.
Have Ayatollah.
Or Ayatollah and say, you can't pass this law, you have to pass that one. And similarly, no policeman's going to come into a mosque, synagogue, recovery group, Course in Miracles meeting, church, or young atheist group and say, break it up because you're not on the list. So with that, our founders were seeking to protect the religious expression of America, not suppress it. The spirituality is the path of the heart. There's nothing about separation of church and state that is transgressed upon by somebody saying, our economic system is sociopathic. When a person does not care about other people, when a person does not care about ethics or morals or any sense of responsibility to other sentient beings or the earth on which we live, that is a sociopath. And if an economic system functions in a way that only feels its responsibility is to address the fiduciary good of its stockholders, even if that means at the expense of people and planet, that is a sociopathic economic system. Not only is it not a violation of church and state to point that out, it is necessary that somebody points that out, and I think necessary to have a president who's very clear about that.